Welcome everyone. Happy Friday. And welcome to Defender Fridays. As most of you know, right, this is our weekly rendezvous to have a just casual fireside chat with industry experts across all, areas of discipline and information security. We've had offensive folks, we've had defensive folks, and everybody in between. And then we got Jeff, who's kind of like an anomaly. He straddles all of the ones. And that's why we love when Jeff comes in with interesting stories and fun commentary. But today we've got a pretty exciting guest. So Jessica's joining us. Jessica, remind me, did we meet in B-Sides Tampa, or did we meet before that?
No, we met at Cactus Con.
Right.
Yeah,
Cactus
a couple
Con.
years
That's
ago.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we chatted off and on ever since. And Jessica was actually someone who got me interested in supporting an organization called Irons. And that's actually kind of where I've seen a lot of Jessica's work. And so Jessica's done a lot of cool things in the space. I think currently you're a senior director of corporate security for Quorum Software. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So we make software for the oil and gas industry. We have about 34 different applications that do everything from like pipeline management to accounting, for reserves and futures and all of that stuff and kind of everything in between.
It's just oil and gas, right?
No big deal. Globally, oil and gas globally. Yeah.
Definitely. So that's pretty awesome. And you've held some really cool roles with other companies like, Booz and others. And one other thing that I know that you're pretty well known for is you're also an advisor and consultant to just dozens and dozens of like massive organizations that are looking to solve large security programs at scale. So that's why I was super excited to bring you on our little casual hangout here, because your topic is, I think, one that's going to resonate with a lot of folks here. And it's basically that shift from, reactivity to proactivity in SecOps, which I think to a lot of folks, it's one of those things. It's like, eat your vegetables and get good physical fitness and all that stuff. And we're like, I know. But the reality is, even in that example I just provided, is most of us aren't doing it. Like a lot of workers, might know that that's the thing that they should be doing, but they either don't have the time, they don't have the know-how, right? And so I'm excited about the topic because it is something that I think a lot of us need to really be thinking about leaning into, or else we stay behind the curve, right?
Yeah. And, I think I agree. We all want to be moving to that proactive state. The reality is it does take know-how and it takes investment from your business and continued investment, right? This is not just we're just going to be proactive now. Like keep with your current run rate, keep with your current staffing, like you're good to go. No problem. Feel free to execute that roadmap.
So real quick, I don't want to assume across the board here that everybody knows kind of what we're talking about when we say kind of reactive, proactive. Jessica, what do those terms mean to you in the context of security?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, when I think about reactive security operations, I think about having my panes of glass, and I intentionally say panes, right, of glass up, and I'm watching for alerts. I'm responding to the thing. I'm going out and quarantining the system myself. I'm putting in a hash, right? These are all reactions to something that has happened or has caught my attention. Whereas being proactive, I'm relying on automations and detection engineering to put stuff in the place so that it doesn't ever get to me. Or if it gets to me, it's like, oh, by the way, this thing happened and we did these things and took care of it. So, just FYI.
And would you say that something like threat hunting plays a large role in the proactive side of this?
I would, but more than that, kind of earlier, if you want to shift left, I would say CTI plays a part in this. And I don't mean like, oh, here's a great list of IOCs. That's just a bunch of data, right? What we really want to talk about is when we're thinking, we want that strategic CTI. So when we're looking at the TTPs of the various actors, targeting us, we really want to dig in on those procedures, right? How are they doing what they're doing so we can do great detection engineering and also then do threat hunts based on that information in our environment?
I love it. That's a big one for sure. And I know one component of that early CTI, right? Like again, to your point, CTI, cyber threat intelligence doesn't mean just going out and plugging in a bunch of threat feeds, right? Blindly.
Yeah.
But like actually kind of understanding what is it that we're defending against? Like what are our crown jewels? And then who in the world is motivated to steal those crown jewels? And I think what that could look like, it's a very simple, relatively exercise of just sit down and tabletop it and develop a threat model, right? Like just, hey, what are our objectives? Because I think a lot of folks, again, on the reactionary side, not only are they very reactionary when it comes to handling the day-to-day SOC coil of just like, oh, an alert fired. Okay, let's go look into it.
Yeah.
They're also very reactionary in like their procurement decisions, right? Like what do we buy? Let's buy an EDR, let's buy a firewall. And they're reacting, based on what.
Yeah. I had a big eye incident. And so now I've opened the checkbook, go buy best in breed, best in class, most expensive platforms and deploy it. And then we have all this stuff we have to run. Dude, go ahead, Jeff.
Two quick things. One, I put it in the channels or the chat as well. But when people hear threat feeds, just to put it out there, if you're buying hashes, IP addresses, domains at that level, you're usually buying burned domains, hashes, IP addresses that will never be used for an attack again. By the time it makes it to that, you're buying snake oil. You're wasting money. You're setting it on fire. With small shout out for if it's active campaigns, if it's private intelligence from people in your same industry, then sure. And then I had, and then as an industry, we tend to focus on building like the higher walls, the preventative controls, the reactive, firewall, better EDR, but as an industry, we kind of suck at monitoring. So spending not just the dollars, but the time on getting good logging throughout your environment is going to be the most bang for your buck, especially with a tiny little bit of deception. I can't help but plug that in there.
Yeah.
Jeff makes a good point that I think we'd be remiss not to say that like I think everybody should pursue and desire to be in a proactive state, but I don't believe that it's something that anyone leaps to, right? Like
no,
right? Because it's almost like you can't become proactive without the lessons that you learned in the reactive state, right? Like it's a
maturity journey, right? You don't go from a CMMI 1 or 2 to a 5. I mean, no one goes to a 5, but you don't make that leap. You have to go through the processes.
So maybe we should normalize this idea of, yes, we all pursue proactive state, but there is no shame in being in reactive state because it's a necessary part of your journey. So long as you're in that constant sort of continuous improvement feedback loop of, okay, what's keeping us in this reactive state today? In my experience, and I'd love to hear yours, Jessica, in my experience, it's most often we're buried in a backlog of alerts and tickets, right? And so we can't go and engineer new automations and write new SOAR playbooks because we got 10,000 alerts to get through. Who's got time for that? But it's like, you see like the
it's a chicken and egg, right? Like, how do we get better? But we also have to deal with this other stuff so we're not on fire. And how do we, keep that forward momentum and that continuous improvement? And that's where I think the argument goes back to investment from, and that buy-in from the business, because if they're not giving you the resources to move to the next level and they're not interested in it, frankly, you're wasting a lot of effort and time, even mental energy, just thinking about it, right? You got to get that buy-in so that you can maybe you need different resources than you already have, right? Because you hired for the job you had today, not for where you need the program to necessarily go in the future, right? Because maybe you didn't know when you hired that person. And so who you have today, and I hate to say this, but who you have today may not be who you need tomorrow. And so maybe you're looking at existing skill sets. Maybe you're, doing some transition plans and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's a tough one. I've had that conversation before, and it's a tough one. It's saying that, hey, look, we're our eyes are on the horizon. We know we need to move towards more autonomous SOC function, things like that. But what what do we do with these 38 tier 1 SOC analysts that we have?
Right.
Well, okay, there's paths there, but it's still tricky. But yeah, I mean, I want to go back to something you said, Jessica, about you've got to have buy-in, right? You've got to have like top-down support for this, because without it, you're right. Like your analyst team is going to struggle to justify why they're kind of neglecting an enormous backlog of tickets in order to build automations and things like that. But I will tell you, I've never met a leadership team anywhere that if communicated properly to about like saving money, saving time, improving effectiveness. Like I've never talked with, executives or leadership that would have been like, no, thanks. Go back to the old way of doing things.
Keep doing it the old way. We're fine, right?
Backlog,
we don't want to be better. That's okay.
Sure, they might raise risk-based questions like, well, okay, if we backburner that backlog to do these great things, what's the likelihood that we miss some critical needle in that haystack? And that's a fair question to ask, right?
It absolutely is, yeah. Yeah, so I think one thing you can also do is sometimes you can get staff aug, right? Like get some contractors or some consultants in, plugging ions. We do this kind of work to help you temporarily with some of those. Maybe they focus on the automations while your L1 team keeps the lights on and keeps tugging away at stuff, right? There's a lot of different models that this can look like, but it speaks to the importance of having good metrics so that you can help build the case for why you want to do the next thing, what you anticipate it to look like, how your KPIs might change, and that affects the risk profile and so on and so forth.
So you just so casually dropped like a critical point in this conversation. And again, it's one of those eat your vegetables and stay physically active conversations of having metrics. Right.
Yeah.
And I know there are folks on this call that eat, sleep, and breathe it. They know it. They know its importance, and they're tracking it like pros. But I think they are the exception.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And that's even in some of the larger orgs that you would think would have a good grip on this, because the rest of the org is very data driven and very, built around metrics. But the SOC, because it's probably the youngest business unit, right? The SOC is the one that's still trying to figure that out. But you're 100% right. The shift to proactivity is almost impossible if you're not even measuring today where those efficiencies are or are not, right?
Well, and we also have to think about the difference between operational metrics that drive our day-to-day program and what we're doing and what we might change, to how those tie to executive metrics to drive the story, to tell the story, to say, I need more resources, or we need to focus on this area over here, right? I can't tell you how many clients I consult with and they're like, oh, I'm giving, we blocked 1 million events, from whatever, in the last thing, and it went to our board. I'm like, why are you reporting that to the board? That is a vanity metric. It means nothing. Like, what are we doing here? And I have to get into the differences of the kinds of metrics and reporting that we should be focused on.
Our firewall blocked over 30,000 attacks today.
Yeah.
Cool.
And shout out to Ben Webb and Chad. He's like, your metrics cannot just be the results from Nessus dumped into a spreadsheet. And
exactly.
I think what we're all saying here is that, metrics are not a checkbox that you just, garbage in, garbage out, folks, right? Like, so you do need to spend some time, defining those metrics and making sure that they're meaningful, measurable, and tell an actual story, right? Because I think your leadership knows the difference, right? If you present these just shock and awe metrics of number of packets blocked by the firewall, it's in one and out the other, but you show how much time was saved, how much money was saved, how much risk was managed or pricing, right? Like, now you're speaking their language, and that's how you move the needle, I think, on the influence conversation of, hey, allow us to invest in automation technologies like SOAR. And by the way, like, I don't like to plug products or product categories, like, unless there's really good reason to, but on this topic of reactivity to proactivity, folks, I think SOAR is a game changer there, right? And
it doesn't have to be a platform. to be clear, we don't have to have platforms to do SOAR. There's so much we can do with existing tooling in our environment and with someone that has some excellent scripting skills. So don't think, oh, I have to go buy this expensive SOAR platform and do all these playbooks and that kind of thing. Don't even start there. Look at inventory today and see what you can do with existing tool sets if you're given the time, right?
Absolutely right. The amount of untapped potential probably in most products that folks have already invested in, 100% with you.
Yeah,
100% with you. Well, all right. I got a hot topic or a quick shift, Jessica. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. What role do you think AI could play for organizations trying to go from reactive to proactive?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're cutting out. I don't have no. So there is room here, right, for AI. I would say it can help you. I wish I had I did a presentation on this just here it is. 1 second. I have talking points about this. So one, helping you to script and code, right? But you can't just rely on that, like, oh, ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or what, name your LLM is going to give me perfect code. Like, that's a terrible idea. And it's a resume generating event more than likely at some point. So you definitely don't want to do that. But let me pull up, where is it? So it can help with beaconing detection. It can help with identifying patterns, right, in data. If you're writing reports, it can do grammar checking for you or readability checking for you. I can't tell you how many times I write something up now, and I don't have sensitive data in it, and I genericize it, put it over in ChatGPT, and I'm like, make this sound nicer, make this sound more professional, that kind of thing. It can help with explaining unfamiliar security concepts. So if you're having to report on, what living off the land is, or, lateral movement, or, name your security concept, and you're having to explain that to someone, right? You can ask it to put it in terms that a layman might understand, or to help you come up with an analogy or a metaphor for that kind of thing. It can help with visualizing data, right? Don't feed it sensitive data, but, you can get it to visualize data for you, because, a lot of us are visual learners and can interpret something a lot more quickly than reading this long document, right?
I like it. I like it a lot. And yeah, the first couple points that you made, you talked about beaconing and, like anomaly detection. And so I think that kind of rolls up under, threat hunting. And I keep coming back around to threat hunting, only because it's, in my opinion, threat hunting is one of the key sort of like foundational components of being a more proactive mindset.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You're assuming the breach at that point, right? Like,
yep.
Or that I've worked with that have they've kind of mastered the reactive posture, right? Like their detections are tuned, their telemetry sources are rock solid. And now and it's funny when they get there, because there's this moment where they're like, what do we do with all of our time now? Like our analysts are now at lower utilization. Okay, well, now we shift over to the proactive topic. All right, let's start assuming the breach. What got past our controls, right? What craziness is Jeff up to today that we don't have a detection for right now, right? And let's start building and testing hypotheses. Well, that's still a very manual, or can be a manual and human-driven event. But to your point, I think that's an area that AI, maybe not yet, but is on its way to really being able to lend a lot of value.
I can't help but double down on a thing you mentioned, the beacon detection. It is just so freaking overpowered. If there is an attacker doing real C2, there is no way that your commodity attackers are having callbacks once per 4 hours to avoid beaconing analysis. They have callbacks of 1 to 5 seconds. And generally speaking, after 100 callbacks, it'll be really damn obvious. I don't care what it is. The fact that there's a new thing beaconing in your environment is a thing worth investigating. Either you'll find an attacker, or you'll find something that you need to learn about inside of your environment.
Yeah, 100%.
Friggin' overpowered in terms of a high fidelity source of things to investigate further. Along with, I'll do just the briefest of shout outs for sensitive command canaries for very common commands that attackers run on their first compromised endpoint. How often do you run system info and who am I and NL test in short proximity versus those 3 commands? And I love to shout out NL test in particular, are like at so many attackers, one of their first commands. List the Active Directory domain I'm connected to and the domain controllers inside.
Yep, absolutely.
Sorry, rant over.
No, those are great points. And I think it really is actionable, right? Like it's an actionable example of how this can be used in real life.
All day. So Jessica, I'm curious, with as many orgs as you've worked with, I'm sure you've encountered, all the different roadblocks that pop up. What would you say are some of the most common things that get in the way of a team that's trying to make this shift, that would like to become less reactive? I mean, what are some of the common roadblocks, and what are some of the ways you think folks can clear those?
Yeah, so one of the things, going back to metrics, right? Not having the data to show that we are making progress and what is our end goal. I think the other, and these aren't super like security topics, right? But I think they're important, and it speaks to us, needing to be more run like a business going forward, but not having a plan and just kind of taking a shotgun approach to things. You're going to end up with a lot of half-baked kind of proactive, but you're probably actually making things worse for yourself and more painful. And so I would say, not having a plan, not having a roadmap, not having that buy-in and the continued buy-in, right? We need to keep reporting, show the progress we're making, those kinds of things. I would say those are the big blockers.
That's awesome. And out of curiosity, I've got a couple floating around in my mind, but what are the top few metrics that you think, if I'm not tracking anything today, but I'm interested in a proactive posture, where should I start in the metric space?
Yeah. So first of all, just understanding your environment, right? What do we have today? What's our mean time to detect? What's our mean time to respond? Those kinds of things. I would look at the number of new detections engineered, right, and deployed, and then how effective they are. Are we getting a lot of false positives? Are we getting a lot of true positives, but benign, right? Is there potential we're missing something and have some, false negatives here? So I would look at those kinds of things. Man, I just had another thought in my head and it just flew right out.
That's fine, because I asked for a couple. You gave me more than that, and you nail all the ones that I was thinking of, right? And
okay.
The often overlooked, I think, is that false positive rate, and to your point, the false negative rate, which that one's can be a bit elusive.
So hard, yeah.
How do we know what we don't know? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, those situations will pop up, right? Like where something blew up, you had no indications, no alerts, nothing fired. You learn after the fact that you had a false negative. That's got to be tracked and postmortem and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the real kicker, the one that everyone's got data for, is false positive rate, folks. Like you've got to look at this thing like a tumor on your security operations team.
Not a tumor.
Because
sorry,
it's not only kind of causing sort of distractions and reducing efficiency, but it also adds to the wear and tear on the human, component, right? Your folks, your SOC analysts will burn out so fast when they come into work and they know that 99% of the things they're going to see today are noise and are
alert fatigue is real, yo.
We can quibble on the percentage, but at some point, humans stop believing alerts if they know that the vast majority of the times they investigate it, there's nothing there. Also the TSA. They fail every pen test going through them.
Right.
Because at some point, humans are not good at very low true positive rate.
Right.
So you cannot have that low fidelity of an alert if humans are monitoring the alerts. It's too I'm sure Eric's seen it at the end of the shift, press Control A followed by mark as false positive on the entire list of alerts, right? Because we don't trust them.
Whereas I think the small handful of truly proactive teams I've seen have it down to an art where if something pops into an analyst inbox, it's going to be interesting. I'll just tell you that. It's going to be unique. It's going to be something that has already been pre-triaged by probably one or more playbooks. It's been enriched and it popped out of the other end because this is new or this is interesting. This is novel. And that's how you keep it interesting for your analysts. It's also how you stay out from underneath a mountain of backlog that's keeping you out of the proactive mindset, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
How about this? If an alert makes it through, it's at least worthy of either investigating the real issue or finding out how you can fix that alert to incorporate more of your own environments. Generic Sigma style rules are a great starting point, but they don't know your environment and your false positives from your production activity. So at least two.
So those are the ones I like to call true positive but benign, right? Like, I had in a previous company that I worked for, we had developers that had to use BitTorrent, and so for reasons, and so I had to, of course, we're like being told, like, oh my God, you have BitTorrent in your environment, right? And if it was certain people, it was like, no, that's allowed, but thanks for letting me know.
I'm just gonna hold my comments. Yeah, but I know what you need to know. I've seen some wild things that, like, yeah, if I'd seen this anywhere else, this would be a threat actor without question.
100%. Yeah.
But here it's normal. Okay, got it. Yeah.
Neat.
There was a topic that you brought up, you touched on. I added some commentary on, but I feel like I might have kind of ran with it and didn't bring it back to you. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would recommend to folks on the CTI side of things in that pursuit of proactive security, right?
Yeah. So I think a lot of our CTI teams focus on lists of IOCs and don't really take the time to query our stakeholders for priority intel that we need to prioritize, for what we're doing. And they really don't get to that strategic intel where they're really digging in at who's targeting us, who might be targeting our industry, if not us directly, what are their TTPs, and then what detections can I engineer based on the Ps, right? Like, the T's are too high level. We need to know how they're actually doing these things and engineering detections related, on the appropriate platform to detect those.
No doubt. And I imagine that process is also a fantastic foundation for, I keep bringing it back to this, for the grounding, because I've always been a strong advocate that the effective threat hunting is always intel driven, right? Like, we don't just go randomly hunt for a TTP because Jeff said it on Defender Fridays.
Right.
You probably should, actually.
I mean, you can, but yeah.
I guess in a way that's intel, right? And in a way that's an intel drop. But it's also, to your point, it's deriving those threat hunt hypotheses based on things that this org is actually susceptible to and worried about and all that kind of stuff.
If we don't have Avanti in our environment, we're not going out and look at the latest Avanti disaster and threat hunting for that. We don't have it in our environments. Waste time, right?
100%. Oh, good stuff. Good stuff. All right, we've got less than a minute. I don't know if anybody had any questions that we might have missed in chat, but if not, I'll just throw out our end of show notes here. So first of all, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
And folks, for anybody that doesn't know, join us in our Lima Charlie Slack. You can get there. There's a link in the channel here, but also slack.limacharlie.io. Every week we give away a cool Defender Fridays t-shirt to a random guest that shows up. So, but you got to be present to know that you want it. So join, and we also tend to drop some links and stuff between the sessions. But then otherwise, I think that'll do it for today. Again, thanks, Jessica. Thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks for having me.